But one thing I really try to focus on is making the customer feel very comfortable and understanding that they can level with me. Do stuff like, you're like, yeah, this part kind of sucks. What do you think about it? Like just be real with them, and they're like, oh, it's okay. It's okay for me to say things that are not great.
All right. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course. It's a great day.
It's my honor to have Nan Yu, who is the head of product at Linear. Linear is one of the foremost companies which has earned customer love like very few companies have across all domains in the last few years. And so couldn't imagine a better guest than the person who's responsible for building the product that has earned so much customer love. Nan, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, happy to be here. It's a great day.
Yeah, it's a great day. Yeah, nice to be doing this in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So I want to start with, I saw somewhere you'd written, and I blatantly copied it internally in how I use it at Enterprise as well, which is, you said like, it's a bug if a customer thinks it's a bug.
Yeah.
And which is like a very simple, but probably a very accurate definition. I'm curious, like, how has that informed like the shipping culture at Linear, and are there times where that definition is tested, where you're almost in disagreement of that, and like, just curious to hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely didn't start with that posture, right? I think I think everyone kind of thinks about bugs like, oh, it has to be an accident to be a bug, or it has to be unintentional to be a bug, and I think that those are good signals. That it signals that there's something to fix if behavior is happening that you didn't really intend for it to act that way. But usually that's not how you hear about a bug, right?
Yeah.
You hear about a bug because someone is confused or they complain about it or something. So I think, as you get bigger, as you get more engineers and more people are doing triage and fixing things, you kind of have to get on the same page about what a definition like actually is. Otherwise, there's too many little judgment calls to make.
Yeah.
So the only definition that actually scales is it's a bug if a customer thinks it's a bug.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's also a strict definition, because like, does that like ever impact like how do you evaluate the pros and cons of like that level of like customer centricity in like fixing the quality issues per se immediately versus what you scoped out and needs to be built, which is also for customers but may get delayed?
Yeah, I think it's very easy. I think for a lot of teams, right? That like someone reports a bug and you're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal, and it gets reported over and over again, and then you get used to it, right? And what you don't want to ever do is get used to something that's bad.
Yeah.
Because then you normalize it, and then once you normalize it, then your perception of things is completely divorced from how customers, how users and customers like interact with the product, right? They look at it, think they're like, oh, this is just getting in my way every single day.
Yeah.
And you look at it, we're like, well, it's always been there.
Yeah.
And then if you once you get to that culture, it's like human nature.
Yeah.
Like once you get to that moment, it's very hard to come back from it.
Yeah.
So part of what we try to do is to fix bugs really early, to really prioritize them above other things. Honestly, so we don't like slip into that pattern.
Yeah. I think one like on similar note is that like, which is like prioritizing bugs is like, as far as I understand, I think like every engineer, every designer at Linear is sort of like a de facto PM basically. It's like, it has like product thinking, is not just thinking about just engineering, just design. I'm curious, like how is that like different for you as like the head of product to have that sort of a team and culture, and what the operating cadence is different versus others? And second, like how do you scale if everyone is sort of a de facto PM, then how do you scale that everyone is like learning also and aligned on the customer needs as well over time?
I think when we think about like PM culture, there's kind of two ways to look at it, right? One way is to say that like PMs have to make every decision. That every single decision in the product has to be run through exactly the same process, the same discovery, the same kind of ideation, like whatever. And another way to think about it is, what are the aspects of the product that absolutely need that really, really benefit from that? And what are things where somebody's first guess is probably pretty good. And in fact, it's so good that it's not worth the time to go through that entire process. And I think that's kind of where that's kind of the direction that we come at it from, right? Like we're lucky in a way. We build tools that are used every day by engineers, by engineering managers, by developers. So a lot of the sort of gut feeling and the experience, especially of our like senior engineers, goes a long way to sort of making judgment calls. And I think that the biggest difference between my working at Linear versus other places is that I will just de facto assume that people are making good judgment calls overall. And if I'm interjecting, it's not, I would say in 99% of cases, it's not reversing decisions. It's like, hey, how do we shape this decision to make it a little bit better?
Right. I love that you're using it to your advantage, that Linear is used by engineers and designers also very heavily. So they obviously are they themselves are their own customers, I guess. Like, and it's a good thing to use to your advantage in the scaling the shipping culture. Having had the chance to work closely with you for the last couple of years, is like I'm always like fascinated by how different your approach to like learning from customer feedback is. It's like you're not looking at the incoming data stream and like trying to glean insights on that. You always have like a hypothesis in mind and a topic you're trying to learn, and that topic is never within the well-defined existing paradigm. But I'm curious, like, how did you develop that perspective of like exploring leading with a hypothesis in mind and just like trying to validate or invalidate that, and then trying to explore the edges of that particular topic and what's on the periphery?
Yeah, I mean, I think this idea about exploring and finding the edges of the product space, of the design space, when people are trying to attack a problem, it's very easy to fall into well-trod paths. And if you're trying to do any kind of like innovation, or you're trying to solve it in a way that doesn't have the same side effects and drawbacks that existing solutions have, you really have to kind of push against the edges of what's possible. And it's not to say that it's this sort of like high-tech research kind of pushing against the edge. It's mainly like, well, what are the underlying assumptions that people have been making about how to design for this particular problem? And then, like, do we have to make the same assumptions? Like, what happens if we broke those assumptions and just hyper-optimize for some parameter? Is it tolerable? Is it better? Right? And then you kind of feel out where the edges actually are.
Yeah. So I remember we had this exchange on X, Twitter, like a few months ago, where I think you had highlighted that you should just save time on intros and like when you're doing a customer call and just like be very efficient, which I think was a very good take and like got a lot of likes, and we sort of also adopted here internally at Enterprise. You've also had the thesis like you should not try to lead them basically in a particular direction. What are maybe like one or two tips around like how to do like good customer interviews basically that you would want to share?
I think when you're doing customer interviews, I think there are too many like specific techniques to necessarily like list out. But one thing I really try to focus on is making the customer feel very comfortable and understanding that they can level with me, right? So like finding out enough about them and like asking them questions and being curious and really showing them, not just like asking the questions in kind of a robotic way, but really showing them that like you get where they're coming from. Because then they'll kind of open up. Like a lot of times what ends up happening in customer interviews is, especially if you're like asking about a product that they're using, is they'll like do this weird thing where they try to like make you happy by telling you everything's great and everything's fine.
Yeah.
Right? And like, so like if you do stuff like, you're like, yeah, this part kind of sucks. What do you think about it? Like just be real with them, and they're like, oh, it's okay. It's okay for me to say things that are not great. Right? So that they don't try to be like people pleasing. I think that often people don't think about that aspect of customer interviews, but it really does come into play quite a lot.
Yeah. Whenever like Linear like launches a feature or a product, like the messaging is so crisp around like why that is done. And like I feel like the amount of respect given to like even a small feature launch is like so tremendous. And it's like, wow, this is an amazing launch. How do you align on what the customer facing messaging has to be for like when launching a new feature or a product?
I think what you're referring to is we have the very regular change logs that go out.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about what we've been working on, what new features we've built, and usually those change logs have one like main thing that we're talking about. And in all honesty, the guidelines for our writing those change logs can fit onto like an index card, right? It's basically you start with assume zero prior knowledge. Right, that's the first thing you have to do, right? Because I think a lot of times, you know, especially when you're writing changelogs, it feels really incremental.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, you know, like in this episode of the TV series, it's like, no, you can't assume they've seen any previous
That's
episodes.
right.
You have to start from zero, right? And then if you start from zero, then the two things you have to communicate are capabilities, right? Which is like, what are you able to do now that you weren't able to do before?
Yeah.
But again, starting from zero, so like you can do this. Now you can do this better, because better is compared to the previous iteration. You know, right? Any comparators to the previous iteration that you can't assume the previous iteration, right? So you have to start from, okay, if I'm describing this to somebody who has zero knowledge before, what do I tell them that they are able to do? So that's the capability. And then the second thing you have to talk about is the benefit. So what's the derivative of the capability, right? Like now that you can do this, how does this fit into your life? And look, you're not going to be able to guess how it fits into everyone's life. You can just say what your intention is, right? My hope is that it fits into your life this way. And I think if you do that, what it will seem like is very consistent, right? Communication, because you know, like no assumption of prior knowledge, and that you know it's really crisp because you're always told, you know, what you're able to do and how it benefits you.
Yeah, that is such a good point, because I feel like a lot of times, like the product launches and even like the changelogs, like they're geared towards like power users versus like the newest user or the user you're hoping to acquire next. I think like that's a very good call out. You've talked about like a lot about like having conviction and letting the market like slap you in the face if you're wrong. Can you recall like a time where you sort of like bet yourself on the conviction, but like the reaction was not that from the market or the customer base, and you had to like pivot basically or do a quick fast follow up on the strategy?
Yeah, so the thing we say internally is whenever we present new features or new solutions, make them really sharp. Right? And sharp is, you know, kind of specific. And to the point where like if it isn't right, someone's gonna cut themselves with it and you'll know. And they'll be very mad at you. And I think that's it's necessary because that's how you're going to get signal from the market, and it's also how you're going to be able to discover the more interesting solutions as well. Right? Like before, when we talked about exploring the edges of the product space, like if you want to push a fairly extreme feeling solution out there, it's going to end up being very sharp. It's going to end up, you know, causing some people to love it, some people to maybe hate it, and then but that's enough to get you signal.
As like, you know, Linear continues to grow, like the go-to-market org is also scaling along with the EPD org, you know, both on like the CX side, on the sales side. How have you thought about like trying to remain, you know, close to the customer from your individual perspective, but also ensuring that the team overall continues to have like good rituals in place to scale customer centricity?
I think, you know, what we said earlier about every designer and engineer can put on a PM hat, like do research, make decisions, and go through that entire process, right? And have a lot of, you know, like authority, right, to think about these things. Really helps us scale. Right, like because we're scaling, you know, like you said, we're scaling the market, we're scaling EPD, but if everyone feels empowered to go directly to customers, to talk to them directly, to gather, you know, kind of gather insights, to make proposals, right? And we have that kind of scale from the team at large, then we don't end up getting bottlenecked, which is what happens a lot of times when you're scaling up your customer base.
Do you see a risk with that?
I think there's always a risk in terms of you can if you let people have a lot of a lot of leeway to do, you know, what they think is right. You know, there's room for error, certainly. But also we have, you know, good error correction processes. You know, it's very, you know, even something as simple as we keep build times low and we make sure that we don't break the build and stuff like that. Like even doing that kind of stuff just lets you turn stuff around really fast. So if we need to adjust, we can adjust.
As you know, AI continues to scale, have you like changed your mind on a belief on anything in the last 12 months about like what it means to like build good products or scale good companies, like a minority perspective based on how the broader thinking currently is on the market?
I think, you sort of talked about as sort of AI has gotten better, how has that maybe changed like my perspective? I am shocked at how quickly the models have developed and how good they are.
Yeah.
So I think it's changed my mind about timelines quite a lot.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. There's a thing that we say is like, you can just skip to the end now.
Yeah.
Like there's no more incremental building, different versions of the thing that get a little bit better. It's like, look, in 6 months it's going to be 10 times better.
Yeah.
So if you assume that, then don't build, month by month. Just build the thing that you're going to love 6 months from now, because the model will catch up.
Yeah. Yeah. We all expected it to be like, the models to get like smarter and better continuously, but like even the pretty fast, but even the definition of pretty fast is like slow from like what most people expected. So it's quite a wild time to live in. And then maybe like to just switch directions, like, you must use also a lot of other products, besides linear. Are there any other like companies that you admire for being like customer centric, basically, or being a customer of their product and how they build things?
Gosh, I don't know if I actually thought about this one.
Or like if I were to like change, like, are there any other like product orgs that you admire of how well they build products, basically, besides linear?
I think I think I've been really impressed with what Intercom has done with Finn. I think that they really nailed like the use case. It was a good natural fit for them. They nailed like the business model. And and I think it's very easy for customers to kind of understand like what's on offer. And everyone kind of wins in that equation, right? Like that's what I really like about it. Because like it lets, it kind of automates a lot of the sort of low hanging stuff that's basically reading off of FAQ anyway. And it lets the folks who are handling the more complex cases like really do more interesting work to begin with. So I think like I've been really impressed by all aspects of what they've done there.
I'd agree. So that and like the whole space there is pretty wild to witness. It's evolved so rapidly. Cool. I think that's all I have. Nan, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks.